Are you also one of those students who got confused about the difference between independent and dependent variable? Don't feel bad, my dear, because I am here to give you clarity and further understanding about dependent and independent variable. Good day, researchers! Welcome back to our YouTube channel. This is me again, Teacher May. Syempre, ang kasama mo sa iyong research journey. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for more updates in Research 1. It is necessary to learn the difference between independent and dependent variable. However, framing a study using these variables is a standard approach in organizing the components of a research study to find out the appropriate and meaningful result. Specifically, it is important for these two reasons. Number one, you need to understand and be able to evaluate their application in other people's research. And number two, you need to apply them correctly in your own research. This is the topic that we're going to discuss in quarter 2 in Research 1. In this lesson vlog, you will be able to identify the variables used in a given problem, and you'll be able to distinguish the variables depending on their uses in a simple science investigation. There are 9 important terms in this lesson vlog that you really need to understand. Number 1, of course, the independent variable. Second is the dependent variable. Third, we have the experimental unit. Number 4, you have the treatment. 5, you have the constant, control group, experimental group, extraneous variable, and number 9, research design. These are the important principles of experimental research. To further understand these terms, let us have a sample of a simple science investigation or simple experiment, and then let us identify these terms. Okay, watch out at panoorin hanggang dulo.
Nadja wants to test the effect of salt as fertilizer on the growth of tomato plants. In her experiment, Nadja said, "I want to conduct a simple experiment. Aha! I will test the effect of salt as fertilizer on the growth of tomato plants." In her experiment, there are 5 questions that are needed to be answered. Number 1, state the objectives being tested. Number 2, name the independent variable or variables, and then the dependent variable or dependent variables. Identify the treatments done in the study, the constants. Identify the research design, and experimental group and control group in each treatment. Title of her experiment is to test the effect of salt as fertilizer on the growth of tomato plants. Nadja prepared 12 pots of the same sizes. She also placed equal amount of 1 kilogram loam soil in each pot. From the nursery, she picked up 12 uniformly sized tomato seedlings. She treated all planted tomatoes with 5 grams of organic fertilizer. And then, she watered all 12 pots with equal amount of water and separated them into 4 groups. This is the first group, second group, third group, and the fourth group. And then, Nadja manipulated the concentration of salt which she used as the fertilizer in her investigation. For setup A, she prepared 75% salt and 25% of water. Setup B, 50% salt and 50% water. Setup C, 25% salt and 75% water. And setup D, 100% water. So this is setup A, setup B, setup C, and setup D. For setup A, she used 75% salt and 25% water. For setup B, 50% salt and 50% water. For setup C, those three pots received 25% salt and 75% water. And for the last setup, which is setup D, having three pots again, they received 100% water. Okay, in order for the setups not to be affected by other variables like human urine and of course rain, Nadia labeled the setups for experiment and observation. Do not meddle. Variables are the factors in an experiment that change or potentially change. There are two types of variables, the independent and dependent. These variables can also be viewed as the cause and effect of an experiment. Experiments are used across all scientific disciplines to explore all kinds of questions. A good scientist always tries to be very clear about three things in any experiment. What is changed, what stays the same, and what is measured.
Okay, explain natin ano ba itong mga 9 principles of experimental research. Ang first question doon kay Nadia is, ano daw yung objective? And ang objective natin is also depend on the title of our research study. And yung study niya is the effect of salt as fertilizer on the growth of tomato plants. The first question is, identify the independent and dependent variable. Okay, so ang dependent at independent variable, makikita na natin yun doon sa title. And when we say variable, these are the things or the entity that can be changed, pwedeng mabago. At doon sa ginawa nating experiment kanina or sa experiment ni Nadia, alin ba doon yung minanipulate niya? Ibig sabihin, alin doon yung mga binago-bago niya? So, di ba kung mapapansin natin, dito sa effect of salt as fertilizer on the growth of tomato plants, merong makikita natin na pwedeng magbago yung growth of tomato plants. So, we have the growth of tomato plants and we also have yung effect ng salt. So, what are the two variables here? So, we have the salt and of course, we have the growth. So, alin sa dalawa ang independent and dependent variable? Now, ano ba yung pagkakaiba ng dependent and independent variable? Okay, from the word itself, alin dyan yung kaya niya na mag-isa? Di ba yung independent? Okay, because when we say independent variable, that is also known as the manipulating variable. Ibig sabihin, yan yung pwede nating bagu-baguhin. At pag binago natin yan, nagkakaroon naman siya ng effect doon sa dependent variable. Kaya nga, dependent variable, it means yung variable na to, nakadepende lang yung pagbabago niya kapag may nagbago doon sa independent variable. Meaning to say, between doon sa dalawang variable, ang kailangan mo lang diyang baguhin at i-manipulate at pwedeng i-change yung concentration or so what, is yung ating independent variable. So, kung natatandaan nyo dun sa experiment ni Nadia, alin ba dun yung minanipulate niya, yung tinaasan at binabaan niya ang concentration nitong bagay na ito? Yun bang growth of plant? O yung salt? Okay, di ba yung salt? Kasi nagkaroon dun ng 25%, 50%, 75%. So, meaning to say, dito sa ating title, salt, this is the independent variable. Kasi yan yung kaya nating i-manipulate at yan yung minamanipulate natin sa problem. However, our dependent variable is the growth of tomato plants. Kasi yung growth of tomato plants, nakadepende lang siya kung gaano karami yung salt na ilalagay mo doon sa bawat pots. Naintindihan? Okay. So, para lang din niya cause and effect. So, sa independent variable, that is our cause. Okay? Kasi we can manipulate that. But when we say dependent variable, that corresponds to the effect. So, what will be the effect on the dependent variable if we change the independent variable? Diba? Hindi naman pwede natin sabihin na, ay, palakihin ko kaya pataasin ko kaya yung growth of tomato plants. Kaya mo bang i-manipulate yung growth of tomato plants? Hindi. Kasi yung growth of the tomato plants, depende lang siya doon sa concentration ng salt na binigay mo. Independent variable is also known as the manipulating variable. Variable that the researcher manipulates, and these are those variables that may influence or affect the other variable. Dependent variable is also known as the responding variable. It is the variable thought to be changed or influenced by the independent variable. Dependent variable is also the outcome variable measured in each subject, which may be influenced by manipulation of the independent variable. Okay, what is experimental unit? When we say experimental unit, it's a physical entity which could be assigned to a treatment. At makikita natin din yon sa ating title, The Effect of Salt in the Growth of Tomato Plants. Of course, kitang-kita naman dyan saan ba natin nilagay yung ating treatment. Kanino ba natin binigay? Of course, doon sa tomato plants. So, meaning to say, our experimental unit is the tomato plant. What are the other principles of experimental research? We also have the experimental unit. It is a physical entity which can be assigned at random to a treatment. Commonly, it is an individual animal. It is also the unit of statistical analysis and commonly the individual study subject. Note that different experimental units must be capable of receiving different experimental interventions. Okay, for the treatment, anong sabi kanina, it is something that the researcher administer in the experimental unit. So, doon sa title natin kanina, ang sabi doon is to test the effect of salt in the growth of tomato plants. Napakalinaw na growth of tomato plants yung target natin. Napalaguin yung tomato plants at para mapalago natin yung tomato plants, ma-achieve natin yung iba't ibang growth ng tomato plants, we apply the different or the effect of salt. So, ibig sabihin, yung effect of salt, yung salt mismo, that is our treatment. So, ano ba pag sinabing treatment? Okay, di ba kapag may sakit ang isang tao, ano ba ang kailangan mong gawin? Siyempre, pagalingin yung tao. And ano yung ginagawa ng doktor? Di ba? The doctor is giving treatment to the patient para mawala ang sakit. Ano yung treatment na gagawin niya? For example, isang taong may cancer, what is the possible treatment for her? Okay, edi syempre, mag-chemotherapy. So, that chemotherapy, that is the treatment. Okay, balikan natin yung ating research experiment. The effect of salt in the growth of tomato plants. So, napakalinaw na ano ba ang ginawa natin para mapalago yung tomato plant. So, we have the salt. So, ibig sabihin, ang treatment natin dun is yung salt. Treatment is something that researchers administer to experimental units. Treatments are administered to experimental units by level, where level implies amount of magnitude. Example, a cornfield is divided into 4. Each part is treated with different fertilizer to see which produces the most corn. Another example, a teacher practices different teaching methods on different groups in her class to see which yields the best results. And another example, a doctor treats a patient with a skin condition with different creams to see which is most effective. Now, let us talk about the constant in the given problem. When we say constant, this is the variable that cannot be changed. Or, ibig sabihin, ito yung mananatili na magkakaparehas throughout the whole experiment during after or in between the experiment. So, dapat yan yung tulad-tulad lahat. What are those variables that are kept unchanged during and between the experiment? Okay. Isa-isahin natin yon. So, we have the amount of soil. We also have the kind of soil, amount of water. We also have the amount of fertilizer, size and number of seedlings, kind of seedlings, and of course, the size of pots. Okay, what is the reason why we have to keep this the same during and after or between the experiment? Okay, syempre, dapat ang mababago lang talaga dyan is the independent variable. Pero lahat, magkakaparehas na yan. Kasi imagine kung dun sa isang setup, mas malalaki yung sizes ng seedlings. O kaya naman dun sa iba naman, mas madaming tubig yung nilagay mo kaysa dun sa isa. O for example, yung kabila naman, hindi mo naman nilagyan ng organic fertilizer but the rest nilagyan mo. So, ano magiging resulta ng iyong experiment? That will be invalid kasi nagkaroon ka na ng bias for each setup. So, dapat pag gumagawa tayo ng experiment, especially kung may iba't ibang setup yan, lagi niyong tatandaan na ang atin lang babaguhin is yung independent variable. But the rest, it should be remain constant. Pare-parehas to avoid bias and for us to be fair. And for us to achieve a reliable, a valid, and realistic result. Constant. These are values that do not change either during or between experiments. It is any aspect of an experiment that a researcher intentionally keeps unchanged throughout an experiment. And it is any aspect of an experiment that a researcher intentionally keeps unchanged throughout an experiment. Note that there can be more than one constant in an experiment. Research design is defined as a framework of methods and techniques chosen by a researcher to combine various components of research in a reasonably logical manner so that the research problem is efficiently handled. From the research design, we can now identify the experimental and control group in the setup. Since we have 4 setups, or Nadia has 4 setups, so we can see that those first 3 setups are the experimental group or experimental setup, and setup D, or the last setup, that is the control group. Okay, what's the difference between experimental and control group? Okay, when we say experimental group, so these are the groups that can receive the experimental procedure, kung saan natin ibinigay yung ating independent variable. Kung mapapansin nyo doon sa 4 setup A, B, C, nandun yung salt, diba? Na merong minanipulate tayo na may 25, 50, and 75%. That is the experimental setup. When we say control group, it is the basis of our comparison. So, doon natin i-compare naman kung talaga bang effective itong ating ginawang treatment or treatment doon sa ating mga setups. And additional information, so when we say control group, so sila naman yung setup or group na hindi naman nakaka-receive noong treatment na binigay talaga natin. And we have 2 different types of control setup. We have the positive and the negative control group. What is the difference between positive and negative control group? Okay, kitang-kita naman sa pangalan. When we say positive control group, it means na ito na yung pwede na i-compare yung ating treatment kung saan siya ay subok na and tested. So, ano ba yung mga example ng mga positive control group? Ang example ng positive control group, ito na yung mga commercialized one. For example, gumawa ka ng insecticide. Okay, gumawa ka ng insecticide na experiment. So, saan yung magiging basis of comparison mo? Pwede mong gamitin yung Baygon as your positive control. So, i-compare mo, since alam mo na ang Baygon ay tested, so pwede mo siyang gamitin as your positive control group. Okay, at ano naman yung negative control group? Kabaliktaran naman yan ng positive. Kung sa positive, sure na tayo na ito ay subok na, tested, at talagang effective. Kapag naman negative control, ito na naman yung alam mo na hindi talaga siya effective. Tingnan niyo yung research design natin dito. Setup D ay 100% water. So, yun yung ilalagay niyang fertilizer, water, bukod pa dun sa binigay natin kanina na na same amount of water. So, ayun yung setup din niya. Water lang talaga yung kanyang fertilizer. And you know that, since hindi naman talaga siya fertilizer, so alam mo na negative talaga ang kakalagpasan niya. Kasi, totally, hindi siya naka-receive ng fertilizer, which is yung salt. Negative control group, alam mo na negative talaga yung outcome. Control group is defined as the group in an experiment or study that does not receive treatment by the researchers and is then used as a benchmark to measure how the other tested subjects do. There are two types of control group, the positive and the negative control. Positive are groups where the conditions of the experiment are set to guarantee a positive result. A positive control group can show the experiment is functioning properly as planned. However, negative are groups where the conditions of the experiment are set to cause a negative outcome. And last, we also have the extraneous variable. Okay, extraneous variable, these are also known as the unwanted variables or the undesirable variables. Ito yung mga variables na pa-epal. Hindi naman kasali ay sumasali dun sa experiment mo. Kagaya sa experiment ni Nadia. So, pwedeng ang maging extraneous variable niya dyan is, for example, nandun lang sa labas ng bahay nila yung mga plants na ine-experiment niya. And then suddenly, merong batang umihi dun sa plants niya. So, mali na agad. So, magkakaroon na agad ng discrepancy dun sa result ng kanyang experiment. O so, for example naman, umulan. Hindi naman talaga siya kasali doon sa iyong experiment. Siya yung mga unwanted variables. Mga epal yan sa inyong paggagawa ng experiment. These extraneous variables have also effect on your experiment. Siyempre, pwede yung makapagdulot ng negative outcome. Kaya dapat yun yung mga iniiwasan natin when we are conducting a science experiment. This is the end of our discussion. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something from me. Again, this is Teacher Tin May, kasama mo sa iyong journey. Again, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for more updates. See you on my next vlog. Bye!